The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 20th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. When he went out again about noon and at about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, because he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?' So the last will be first, and the first will be last." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
One of my biggest fears, aside from snakes, is the fear that I'm going to be caught in a situation where I don't necessarily act very pastor-like or Christian-like, or really just utterly rude or jealous or angry. Because I admit, it happens sometimes. I'm not proud of it. But all that is to say that I have this irrational fear of being caught on one of those candid camera TV shows. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, it used to be that those shows were meant to be fun and amusing, playing, practical jokes on people or putting people in a situation where in the end, hopefully everyone is laughing. Now, I remember one episode I saw where they were in a mattress store and people were sitting on the mattresses and laying on them, testing them out, but there was one that was a big box filled with water, covered with a bed sheet, so when people laid on that, into the water they went. I liked that. I thought it was funny. I'd probably be mad if that was me, but so then they started doing hidden camera shows where they put you in maybe more serious situations. Those moments aren't always our proudest moments, but apparently they make for good TV. So when I hear this parable from Jesus, one of those shows from a while back came to mind as being a similar situation to this parable. Let's see if we can play it.
This supermarket is getting ready to present a $1 million prize to their 1 millionth customer.
Excuse me, sir, would you mind if I went before you? I just have this pineapple real quick. I left my dog in the car.
When our spy TV agent cuts ahead of this shopper, it's party time. Our guy is the millionth customer. Unfortunately, there's no prize for customer 1,000,001. Let's bring in the fake news crew.
I'm Brenda Epperson reporting live for News 3. This is a big surprise. You are Smith's 1 millionth shopper, and you, sir, have just won, are you ready? $1 million.
No way, I just let it go in front of me.
You just won $1 million, sir.
You gotta be kidding me. I just let him cut in front of me with the paper behind it. Wow.
Is this real?
You just won $1 million, sir.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yes, sir, we are. And we're also kidding this guy.
Congratulations, sir. You are Smith's 1 millionth shopper, and you have just won, sir, $1 million. $1 million. This is not a joke, sir. How does it feel to win a million? Right? No, sir, this is not a joke.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Yes, you certainly are. Have you ever won $1 million before?
No, but I got $1 million.
What are you going to do with this money?
Split it with me. I let her put in front of me.
We're going to end it there because that's where the cursing begins. But think about this situation for yourself. I mean, have you ever been invited to go in front of someone who's checking out at a store because you only have 1 or 2 items? Or have you been in the position to let someone go in front of you because they only had an item or 2 and you weren't in a hurry that day and, why not? You know what always happens? That one item they have doesn't ring up and they have to do a price check on it, and someone has to go back in the store and wait and find it, so you're waiting for that one item that you let go in front of you. Or what happens when that person is the 1 millionth customer and they win $1 million that you obviously deserved? How do we respond when that happens? I wish it would happen. As I kind of admitted at the start, I'm not really sure how I would respond if I were in the midst of this parable that we heard, being one of those workers who was unfairly paid by the landowner. If I was one of the laborers who started early in the day, yeah, I'd probably join in that choir of grumbling when I received the payment. If I were one of the laborers who started later in the day, I wonder, would I have recognized what was happening and would I have offered to split it or share what I earned? As self-made Americans, we've been taught to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and work hard and make a living for ourselves. And sometimes that teaching also says that when we find an advantage, what do? Take it. If that advantage is to our advantage, we're in luck. But if that advantage is against us, and for someone else's advantage, well, we might find ourselves griping and grumbling and maybe feeling sorry for ourselves. Now, I don't have the right to speak for everyone here, but I have heard from many that this parable is their least favorite parable of Jesus' teachings. I've heard from some who are part of labor unions that they hate this parable. This is nothing like real life. It's not how this works. Because, yeah, the way the landowner works doesn't make sense to us. It's not fair. So what's Jesus trying to do? Well, he's not starting the parable out by saying, fair employment practices are like a landowner who goes out early in the morning and hires laborers. No, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like this landowner. I think it helps if we take a look at where this is in Matthew's gospel, because it feels like at this point, Jesus is fired up. He's trying to get the disciples and our attention. I think he's doing that. Right before this parable, we hear the story of the rich man who comes to Jesus and asks how he can obtain eternal life. And so Jesus says, follow the commandments. And the rich man says, which ones? And Jesus says, all of them. And the rich man says, I've done that, so now what? Okay, fine. Go sell all your possessions and give it to the poor. To which the rich man doesn't have much of a reply and goes away sad. And Jesus uses this as teaching his disciples, where he says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. And so after seeing that, the disciples are there, and Peter speaks up and says, Jesus, we've left everything and followed you. What do we get? Oh, Peter, the kingdom of heaven doesn't work like this. Understanding the kingdom of heaven isn't something that's for us to do. It's only by God's mercy and grace that the kingdom of heaven is available to anyone. And this is where we still don't seem to get it. At least with the way that we've been shaped, this doesn't make sense. There always needs to be one of those, if I do this, I get this type of logic, right? But by this point, I hope we know better. Because when it comes to God's kingdom, our logic should go right out the door. It seems too often, lately, that we've had to utter those words that life is not fair. Between catastrophes around the globe and sicknesses and brokenness and death, we've been realizing that the logic that we want this world to operate by and that we want God to operate by just doesn't work out. It seems like bad things always happen to good people and good things happen to bad people, and some people who work so hard are barely getting by, and some illnesses are cured while others aren't, and death is just indiscriminate. What gives? I think we found that this world isn't logical, at least in our sense of logic. After God created good things, sin and evil and brokenness entered this world and began to steer the ship however they wanted. And we are left to ask, why? And as we've found, there really isn't a good answer to that question. The only thing that we can find ourselves saying is that as illogical as we find the ways of this world, we can at least trust that God's mercy is just as illogical, at least in our logic. God does whatever God wants to do, and if it's a reflection of this parable from Jesus, God offers the mercy of this kingdom of heaven indiscriminately and unconditionally. Doesn't matter if you've worked just a little or a whole lot. At the end of the day, God shows the same mercy to all. But still we hear grumbles of, that's not fair. I worked way harder than that person. I've led a much better life than this person. I let that person jump ahead of me in line. Where's my advantage? In God's kingdom, we've learned that the advantage is truly God's mercy. Jesus is stirring the pot with this parable. There's no question about that. So can't God's mercy then free us to see a wider picture of this kingdom? Instead of being focused on each single moment, or on each advantage or disadvantage that we come across, or on one single grocery store line, is there a way that all of us can open our eyes to see a wide and expansive view of God's mercy? Amen.